I just got home from Las Vegas, New Mexico, where I was performing in a show to honor the poet S. Omar Barker. I had a really wonderful time. I got to meet a lot of the Barker family and interview some of them for a future podcast. I got to visit the original Barker homestead and see Omar Barker's barn and his apple orchard and look through his personal scrapbook. To top it all off, Dennis and Carol Dittmanson, who brought me out for the show, gave me an original copy of Barker's first book of poetry from 1924. I'd like to thank the Dittmansons and the Barker family for everything, and I'd like to kick today's show off with a poem from that book. This is entitled Saddle Lure. Oh, I've sat on hard park benches, and in springy Morris chairs, and on silken flowered mats in far Japan. I have parked my lazy carcass in the cars of millionaires, and I've ridden howdahs in the French Sudan. On a swivel in an office and a steamer chair at sea. Well, I've even sat and dreamed on woodland moss. But there's just one kind of sittin' that is always home to me. That's a straddle of a good old saddle hoss. Just a lopin' through the sagebrush where the purple mesas rise, or a helpin' keep a cow herd on the go. When they're saddle leather creakin', I ain't heavin' any sighs, 'cause I've got my seat in heaven here below. Howdy folks, this is Andy Hedges, and you're listening to Cowboy Crossroads. On each episode, I interview a different guest and ask them to share stories and discuss music, poetry, and culture from the working cowboy west and beyond. My guest today is Mike Beck. Mike is a singer, a songwriter, a guitarist, and a horseman. Tom Russell has said, Mike Beck is one of those riders with the cowboy in his heart. His songs are filled with braided rawhide and mission bells. Listen up, friend. And Ramblin' Jack Elliott has said, Mike plays the guitar like a bird. His strings do things that mine never could. They obey the slightest finger-touch commands like a fine reining horse. I sat down with Mike to record this interview on the coast of California, in a beautiful canyon outside of Monterey, California, where Mike grew up. And he told me some wonderful stories, some of which made it into the podcast. Here's Mike Beck.
You know, growing up out here, we're in beautiful Paula, Colorado Canyon, just south of Monterey, where I grew up, you know, and my dad was in the Navy, so I was the youngest of all our kids, you know. And so my parents were like 10 years older than most kids my age. So my dad retired from active duty in the Navy when I was born. And then he went to work in Monterey for the Naval Postgraduate School. And so my older brother and sister had to, you know, they lived in different places, you know, Navy places, but this is where I was. That's how we ended up here, you know. And back then, you know, my dad was just a chief in the Navy. He was chief machinist mate, you know. And he joined the Navy at 17 before World War II. They didn't need guys, and he lied about his age, but he was institutionalized. All of his brothers and him were Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, put into a orphanage. So he wanted out of this orphanage bad. So he joined the Navy, and he was in the South Pacific. And this kind of ship he was on, he was at every major assault in the South Pacific, in the Guadalcanal and Iwo Jima, everything, you know. And he never said one damn thing about it ever, you know. So, but that's how I ended up in Monterey, and it was I just count my lucky stars because it's especially back then, you know, it's But what I was getting at, as a chief in the Navy, he could move to Monterey. It's a very expensive place now. He could come here and buy a couple acres. And my mom, she was raised up on way northern Alberta, and was raised with her grandparents on a farm ranch / thing up there, and so they had teams up there in Alberta, and so we had horses. I got a horse when I was in 3rd grade, and we had plenty of places to go out and ride. So we kept him at home. We could just ride. We didn't even own a horse trailer, we just went everywhere. So I'd ride that horse after school and on weekends, and it was just a perfect way to get into horses. Just ride through the hills, fall off and slide off and get stepped on, and ride to the beach and, ride up in the hills. And so it was a great way to get interested in the horse, just the pure love of it, When I go to places like Norway and do these clinics and stuff, helping people with these horses, they got the way they start riding is they start taking lessons. And to me, that's sort of ass backwards. You should just go out and have a lot of fun and build an interest, and just exciting. And then you're ready to learn something else. But they kind of start off on the wrong end of it, and so. But growing up here was just I tell people it was a great place for someone like me who is just in love with music and in love with the whole horse thing, And I got to know the Dorrances, and they lived close by, and I got into their lives later, a little bit later after, but they became just a huge influence on me, especially Bill. I lived with Bill up on Mount Toro family ranch. They still have it, and he became like my dad died when I was pretty young, so I look back. I think I was looking at a lot of guys as father figures and stuff, But there was and for music, it was just I was just how does every guy, Andy, fall in love with music? I mean, at the beginning, you want to play to kind of. It's too mysterious to put your finger on why you want it. Of course, it's how you can create an identity, But it was more for me. It just moved me. I remember watching on television. We had a black and white TV. I'd get a couple stations, and it was the ABC TV had a show called Hootenanny, and so I'd watch that. And I remember. Maybe the theme song or something, but when those guys started playing the banjo and singing, and it was like, Ian and Sylvia were on it, and the Kingston Trio and stuff, and I'd just get chill bumps watching this stuff. I couldn't figure out why. And also I got them from listening to Chuck Berry, too, on the radio. We had a great AM top 40 station down on Cannery Row, KMBY, top 40 music power, #1. And we'd ride our bicycles down there and go up, it was right on Cannery Row, and go up there and look through the glass at this DJ doing his thing, and we were just like, I was just like, couldn't believe that was so exciting to see this guy spinning records, and that was the guy we listened to, And of course, the radio was just huge. I remember at the postgraduate school, the Navy thing, my dad belonged to this organization called the Fleet Reserve Organization. It was just a bunch of sailors, ex World War II sailors drinking beer and hanging out and talking. But they'd have a bingo, And I remember I'd go into bingo with my family, and we'd go there and play bingo. And one day I won. I couldn't believe it. Shit, I won. I couldn't believe it. And they said, well, you can pick over there on the table anything you want, and I can't remember what was there, but I saw a kitchen radio, one of these square kitchen radios, AM and FM. Maybe it had a clock on it, and I brought that home, and holy shit, my world opened up to the Giants too. Listen to the San Francisco Giants. And the two announcers, Russ Hodges and Lon Simmons, and I was crazy about baseball and the Giants and Willie Mays, and I just sit and listen to that, and I'd just close my eyes and just, I'd have it up there in the window, kind of, and the window in my house, we lived up in the trees, but you could still, I'd have that window open and I could hear the seals, down on the wharf, all night, You hear waves breaking. And I could tune in now the radio, man, and that was like, and the top 40 radio back then. When we'd ride our bikes down there, my brother and our friends, they had a little piece of paper there that had the top 40 that week, and the top 10 on it. And my brother saved some of those. And I don't know, a couple of years ago, said, hey, look at this shit. Look at this. And I mean, it's the Stones, it's the Kinks, it's Ike and Tina Turner, it's Otis Redding, it's like the Beach Boys, it's like, the occasional, novelty song and stuff, But I mean, holy cow. It was good stuff, yeah. And I loved it. The radio brought so much into me,
In addition to his music, Mike Beck makes his living traveling the world, helping people with their horses. Mike is a respected horseman who is mentored by the legendary Bill Dorrance. I asked Mike how he came to know the Dorrances, and like a lot of good stories, it started with a girl.
There was this girl who was played the guitar and sang folk songs, and she really sang great and was beautiful, and we pound on guitars, and sing folk songs, and she also knew some like Cat Stevens songs and things like this, but I think a lot of Joan Baez was probably going down the pike, and and I was still messing around, riding around these horses, not serious about nothing, just having fun on them, ride them around, and so her dad, Roy Verzani, he had a boarding and training stable out in Carmel Valley at the top of the Los Aurelius grade. And I told her, I said, look, if your dad ever needs any help, because I wanted to make some money, probably wanted something, And I always had jobs, And so I said, hey, if your dad needs anybody up there to clean stalls, you let him know that I'd come up and do that, And it wasn't too long before I got a call from him, to my parents' house. And I think my dad was gone by then, but my mom wrote a message on the chalkboard to call him. And he needs some help up there to come up and clean stalls. A guy didn't show. So I went up there and I met Roy Verzani, and he showed me how to drive this flatbed truck and go by all the box stalls and clean them out and put fresh straw in there and sweep up and go out into these little paddocks and rake up horse turds. And I just liked him. He was a cool guy. And then I saw him at the end of the day. After I got all my work done, he was working with horses. And so I was just watched. And I was super shy back then, really shy. And I watched him, and he had a round corral. I'd never seen a round corral, and he was starting a horse, and I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anything about it. And I thought it was the coolest thing. I just was totally mesmerized by it, that it made me bold enough to go, I step out of my shy self, and I said, because he didn't need me the next day, he just needed me for one day. And I said, are you going to be doing this tomorrow? Working with this horse? And he said, yeah. And I said, about the same time of the day? Yeah. And I said, is it okay if I come by and watch? And he said, yeah. And so that was the beginning of it. And I started hanging out there. What he was doing, I didn't know anything. But I was really taken by what he was doing with the horse, the way he was working with his horse. And so I come to find out that Roy's wife, Andre, they ran this together. Her and Margaret Dorrance, Tom Dorrance's wife, were like best friends and still are. And Tom spent 6 years helping Roy for Zani, and he would show up there quite a bit. And so what I was seeing was a guy working with a horse in that style, that approach. And then I got to meet Tom at wasn't too long, they had a Christmas party. What I loved was the camaraderie of the horse thing and the people. Roy was amazing. He was the guy that he showed working cow horses, and his wife, but he would help these people with the jumping horses and hunter jumpers, and his wife too. She really great people, really honest, fun. We had fun and worked hard and fun, and I loved it. And so there was a Christmas party, at this stable, because they invented a job for me. One day I showed up, and him and his wife, they'd been talking. They said, okay, well, tell you what we're going to do. We're going to give you I can't remember what it was, like $3 or $4 for you to ride this horse and this horse. These are horses people are boarding here and they're not doing it. They need to get out and go. And that place, you could get out in the hills and go. It was a perfect place to ride horses, to ride colts and stuff. Good footing. Long dirt roads, with brush on both sides, so you could air these buggers out up there, So they had a job for me, and then, so they said, hey, we're having a Christmas party, and you're invited. And, and I couldn't believe it. I was invited, And so I went, and there's this girl, and she was brushing out her horse's tail. And she kept her horse there, and she was really a great rider. And Tom had been giving her lessons. I hadn't met Tom yet or anything, and he liked to help younger people with their horses, riding lesson things. And so she was, and she was so cute, and I kind of had a crush on her, And here was this guy standing there, no cowboy hat, no cowboy boots, and lace-up shoes, and just a little kind of a little sport coat, hair combed, and he was visiting with her, and I was a short guy, looks a little like Charlie Russell in a way, and kind of dark-skinned, and he left. And she said, "You see that guy there?" And I said, "Yeah." She goes, "That's probably, that guy could be the greatest cowboy ever." And I was like, "What? He didn't have a cowboy hat on. I didn't see a big buckle. I didn't see boots, She said, and I was like, well, that's it. What? That guy? And that was the first time I laid eyes on Tom. And so he was there when I worked with Roy a lot. He was around, and I got to see him help Roy with horses. Have him, I got to go out and ride through the hills a lot with Tom. And got to and the thing now, those guys are made into folk heroes and folk legends, and I want people to kind of know when I spread the word about the Dorrances, and I'll get to Bill in a minute, but they like to laugh and have fun. They really did. And, I remember Tom, I was riding up by this arena, and I was on this horse, and he just rode up horseback, and he was dragging a big sheet of plastic, and he just held it out and said, "Mike, get a hold of this." And I was like, okay. And my horse was getting kind of scared, and I thought, well, is he going to get me killed? And things sped up there pretty fast. But and he's laughing, and it wasn't to set me up. There was always another underlying thing with Tom. It was about getting a horse's hindquarters free, is what it was about. But he was laughing, and I was laughing, and I was scared and laughing, and it was cool. But no, those guys were great. And then, so when I worked for Roy, I didn't have a saddle that was worth a darn, And so he had 4 or 5 of these these Dale Harwood saddles, and considered really nice saddles. And he let me use one. And I remember he was having me ride this horse that was super touchy. And we'd hobble him with the sack hobbles in front. That's where he liked me, and then put the saddle on. And so I had this horse hobbled in front, and I threw that hardwood up there and cinched it up, and just then the wind blew this overhang canvas cover, and it scared that horse, and he tipped over backwards, I remember. And it was asphalt kind of right there where we saddled up, and scratched that top of that Cheyenne roll, and I went, oh shit, And so I got on, and Roy told me, saddle that horse, ride him up to the arena. I'm going to be up there riding. You come up there. And I remember he rode over on this colt and took the opportunity to get the gate open horseback. And right when he opened that gate, he looked down. It wasn't a huge gouge, but he saw it. I mean, it happened like 3 minutes before, and he saw it. And he said, what the hell happened? And I felt like shit, So I wasn't really making any money there, and I said, you know what, I need to get my own saddle. And so I quit. I told him I'll be back. And I got a job washing dishes, and I saved up some money, and I bought a Capriola saddle that I got from a guy that had, I didn't put the order in, but it was pretty new, and he was getting out of cowboying, and so it was good for me because I bought his chaps and his snaffle bit and his rope and his saddle. I bought the whole outfit from him. It was perfect timing. And then when he said, hey, this guy was selling, he was happy to get out of it, really. And he said, you should meet my friend Brian Newbert. And so then I started going over to Brian's house and riding colts. And then Brian was always riding colts. He was such a good hand. And he said, hey, I'm going to this place called the Spanish Ranch. I bet I can get you a job there. You should go. You should go with me. And so I'd been riding these horses, but never cowboyed. And I went right there. I went right to the Spanish Ranch and started. The first time I cowboyed. First time I roped anything or anything. And everybody said, you're going to get fucking killed there, man. And I would have if it hadn't have been for Brian. Brian was and he's just one of my horse heroes, and a good guy. He's fun. And his whole family, I love him. Patty and the kids, it was amazing. So, but he saved my butt. When we were alone out in the brush, he'd say, hey, I see the way you're getting on those horses. You're going to get your kneecap blowed off. Let me show you a good way to get on there and stuff like that, when no one else was around. Because he didn't want anybody to think he was a know-it-all, And then, they were talking all about Bill. And Brian lived in Pine Canyon right at the bottom of Mount Toro. And he told me a lot about Bill, and then he said, I said, God, if I could only meet Bill, because, when you're out on those wagons, I mean, we're talking about, there was nothing on the Spanish Ranch wagon for entertainment, or you never got any mail, or you didn't hear any TV or radio, and it was like a Zen retreat, really. Only you made $10 a day doing it. And so I'd get these, you'd really talk. And that's, of course, where all this poetry, that's the first time I heard poetry, cowboy poetry was out there. I loved it. Brian knew a bunch of poems, and I loved it. What kind of
stuff were you hearing out there?
Well, Brian had spent time with Tom, and Tom actually knew a lot of cool little poems. I don't know the origins or who wrote some of those. Somebody would. But he also had a very rare book at the time. You couldn't find it, and it was called Rhymes of the Range. Right? That's what that's called. It's Kiskadin, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And so Brian borrowed that from Tom and learned a bunch of those. And oh, shit, I had to learn them too. I want to learn them. And I remember I'd find a piece of paper out there and write it down. And it was easy to memorize a poem out there. There's, I tell people going out in that wagon, you're out there for like 3 months and you don't, there's no distractions. Your biggest fear every day is not getting bucked off and hurt, That's it. And Brian made it super fun. I'd be like, man, these horses, it was over my head. These horses there were really something. They didn't get started until 6 or 9 years old, They had so far to go. We trotted about 50 miles a day. I mean, it was amazing. And Brian, I'd be riding along tight, man, tight. And he'd say, hey, it's a great day. Isn't it? He said, all you got to worry about, he says, is getting bucked off. There's people going to shit jobs right now. They trade places with you in a heartbeat. Smile! And, and pretty soon you're having fun. I mean, I don't know if I would have stuck with cowboying if I hadn't been influenced by Brian. But he told me so much about Bill, and then he said, I'll bet if you write him a letter, he'll write you back. And I was like, really? And so I did. I just sort of introduced myself to him and asked him questions. I was full of questions about these horses, still am. But I remember back then just like, wow, I was just living and breathing it, And I'd ask these questions, and so I wrote Bill, and he wrote me back the letters. I've saved them, and it's addressed. It says Mike Beck, Spanish Ranch, Tuscarora, Nevada. I mean, that's it, and he's had some nerve damage in his right hand, so his hand shook quite a bit when he wrote, and I think that he wrote these long letters to me because I watched him write. It took him forever to write something beautiful. How everybody wrote with that longhand kind of writing style of writing they learned in school. And I've saved those letters. Yeah. And so he wrote me and encouraged me, and it had some tips, of course, for these questions that I asked, And then at the Salinas Rodeo, the Dorrance family has a box there, and that's not just the rodeo. In the morning, there's quite a competitive stock horse class there, and so he would sit up there and and he had a cane and he had both his hips replaced and everything, and he'd get dressed up for this. He'd have a nice jacket with a tie and the rodeo, the Salinas Rodeo, and the up at the Cow Palace in San Francisco, the big stock show and rodeo, he would dress up for that, put a tie on and stuff, and otherwise I never saw him in a tie. And God, man, we could do several shows just about Bill and Tom, but he'd sit up there and he'd send his boys out and say, bring back. Go out there and get Joe Marvel and tell him to come over and say hello, And so there's bronc rider Joe Marvel, and of course they were family friends with the Dorrances, and they'd come up and visit with Bill, and you'd be sitting there, and so he sent for me. He sent one of those guys to come get me because I wasn't up there with him, and we visited, and he said, Mike, he says, Billy and Dave, his two boys, they're farming in Hollister, he said, and Steve is going to Cal Poly. And it's just me and my wife up there, and he said, and I could use your help. And I can't pay you, but I will feed you, give you a place to live, and I'll help you with the horses and cattle. And if that sounds good to you. And I just couldn't believe it. And this, once again, I was pretty shy back then. I didn't have, confidence or something. And he said, I couldn't believe this guy invited me. We'd all been talking about him, people were talking about Bill and Tom Dorrance, and he invited me to live with him. And he could, and he'd help me with the cattle and horses, he said, in exchange for helping him. And so I was living, and and I didn't get back to him. And then he called, he got my number somehow, and he said, well, are you coming or what? And man, I was up there. And that began a lifelong relationship. It changed my life. It totally changed my life. That guy, and when I look back on it now, Andy, it's like an old-fashioned apprenticeship that I went through. It was a one-on-one thing. It wasn't a clinic, there's 30 people or something. It was just me and him. And every day, we did something fun. I mean, work, but it was just like I was on fire to learn. And the only time I left the ranch was I played in a bluegrass band on the beach at the Holiday Inn in Monterey every Monday and Tuesday night. So he didn't understand that, He didn't understand that I was going to play music. He wasn't interested in it. If it wasn't practical, he wasn't interested in it. But he let me go do it, and that was the only time I left the ranch. And so I'd go in there and I'd get home at like 2, it was old bar hours. And and the breakfast was at 6 or something. I had to get up and do the chores first and feed horses or, feed some leppy calves or something, and I'd be falling asleep in the afternoon, and finally figured out, he said, well, maybe a fella could take a little snooze after lunch here, and he'd let me lay down and sleep a little bit. And so I was in a bluegrass band, and I didn't need any money, and I made money there at the Holiday Inn on the beach, playing bluegrass.
On his 2008 album, Yellowhead to Yellowstone, Ian Tyson recorded a song he wrote about the cow boss of the Spanish ranch in Nevada, Bill Kane. One verse of the song says, "There's miles of open country on the Spanish. The snow blows through the sagebrush on the span. Bill Kane worked the roe deer with those gunsel crews. How he pulled it off, I would never understand. Bill Kane was the man." How long did you work out there?
A couple years. I think I set a record. A couple years, and that was for Bill Kane, who's the legendary, buckaroo boss. He was the Captain Ahab of the Sagebrush Sea, man. That son of a bitch was amazing. He was, I working for him, I got along with him. But I was blessed the way I was raised. You don't say a goddamn thing. Don't say nothing. Just shut up and watch. If somebody addresses you, you speak to them. But nobody needs to hear any shit coming from you, And so my whole thing was just, I just fit in there with him. And he had so many dudes come through there that he wouldn't learn your name for 2 or 3 months, And he called me over there because he liked that I had a guitar on the wagon. Other guys were braiding or learning poems or sleeping or just, talking. Great stories, that. But I was playing the guitar, and so he kind of liked that. And I had this song, because he was in the Army, and I had a song that I learned from Country Joe. It had a line, it was about get over here, stand over there. We're sending you Southeast Asia, and it was about that. And he loved it. Over here, over there, he called me. But no, Bill Kane was I got along with him. I liked him, and he was, and he's still around. In fact, I think I'm gonna see him soon because I'm gonna be playing a show right in Oregon where he lives coming up in May. I'm gonna go drive and see him. But no, man, that guy was, he could ride anything there. He knew that country unbelievable. I mean, it was just, and as I've gotten older, I know the difference. There's a difference between respect and fear, and, but man, something with him, I had fear of him, but I wanted to please him so bad. I really wanted to please that guy. And, he set me up several times to see where I was at. And I remember one time that I first got there, and it's before the wagon came out, and Brian had told me, they said, now when you show up there, you're going to get a new horse every day. He's going to be in your string. And you're going to have to shoe him, and then, when you get about 7 horses or 8 horses in your string, then, by that time we'll be going out in the wagon, probably pulling out then. So we're at the headquarters working, and every day I'm getting a good horse. Not a bad horse. Nothing buck with me. And hadn't rode with Kane. 3rd day, and I remember we were splashing through these meadows. It was all flood irrigated, and we're riding along, and he says, and there was guys that had been there before me. One was Brian and his friend Randy Layton, local Salinas guys, and so I'm from down near here, and so we're riding along, and Kane said, "So Beck, you cowboyed a lot down there in California with Brian and Randy? You cowboyed a lot down there?" And I said, "No, sir, Mr. Kane." I said, "I have never cowboyed. This is the first time I've ever cowboyed." And I told that to Brian later, and he said, "Oh shit, you did the right thing. Oh, you did the right thing." He said, that king can tell when you're driving down the lane whether you've ever cowboyed or not, just the way you drive in. And it's true. And so he set me up to see if I was going to be a braggart. And I was like, no, sir. And then I started getting horses bucked with me every day. I started getting some shit to ride. But, man, that guy, you know, I saw it when he roped those horses in the morning. It was, has never been videoed, as far as I know, you know. It was beautiful. It was amazing to see. And, you know, and a good cowboy, really good. I day worked out in Carmel Valley at Ranna Creek Ranch a lot, you know. And so Tom was holding a clinic. Tom Dorrance was having a clinic at Roy Frazani's place. And so I took a company horse. They let me take one up there to work with him. And so there was all these colts to start. And so people would bring these colts, and Tom was going, you know, these people be leading these unstarted horses in there. And he'd say, do you mind if Brian works with your horse? And these people are like, no, I don't care, you know, because oh sure, you know, they don't want to get so any trouble, you know. So, you know, he had like me and I think Randy Layton was there and Brian and some other people maybe. And so we were starting 13 horses all at once in the same corral. It wasn't round, but it was square, good footing. That Roy started horses in there. And so Tom's up on the fence directing traffic. And so I got this thoroughbred from somebody, you know, do you mind if Mike starts your horse? And these people were like, no, here you go, you know. And then a girl saw me there doing that, work with Tom. She just came to watch. And she said, you know, I saw you. I need some help with the horse. Would you come and help me? I keep my horse down below, you know, at some other place. And I said, yeah. And I said, it'll cost you $50. And she agreed to that. And so I went down there and helped her, and then I didn't realize how much I could help her. I kind of didn't know. I was pleasantly surprised that, man, I could, you know, up until then it'd be just like, you know, can I stay safe on this sumbitch, and can I get the job done? Can I get him nice? Is he better at the end of the day? And then I could see that I really enjoyed helping her. And then she was at another place where people kept their horses, and other people were watching and said, are you going to come back and help her again? And I said, if she wants me to, yeah. And they, can we join in? So next thing you know, instead of day working, which was, you know, kind of running out, I was making good money for me, you know, helping these people with these horses and enjoying every bit of it and really enjoying it. And I was so surprised at and how much I was learning helping these horses. And so I had a good role model with Bill for the way to present things to people. Tom, I didn't spend that much time with, you know. I was around him a lot, but Bill's the one that really, and Tom was so uniquely different. He was so, there's really genius, you know. I think it was hard for him to explain things to people, especially at the beginning, you know, when he started to help people. I know he helped people his entire life, way before I knew him, you know, but when Bill had to struggle more for it. I think Bill could put it into words more. Bill was the very best teacher of anything I've ever been around. He could just watch you and he'd have a suggestion and keep you encouraged and never bullshit you, you know, and it was just like straight up. And so when I help people, I always, you know, it's kind of like that, you know, Ian Tyson song about Will James, you know, the guy's out in that camp, you know, wow, I took a job and didn't know what to do. He said, what would Will James do? It'd be like, what would Bill do? How would Bill treat this person? So when I started going, you know, to all over the world in a lot of ways, you know, it was huge for me to go to Norway and Sweden and Denmark and Finland and England. That was huge for me. And that's all word of mouth, you know, and it's low key, you know. It's I never have advertised for it, you know. It's just it was a way that it was fun for me and challenging. And man, that's when you learn, when you start having to help people, you know. But I always refer to them, and so not that I'm doing it like them, but I would try to, you know. And just that's what saved my ass was with the people and the horses. Was, you know, breaking the pattern, do these different things that they really instilled in me. And that's when you start learning. I mean, when you got so many horses you're working with all the time, it was great, you know. And how to present it to somebody. Because the horse, he became the easy part of my job. Really the easiest part. And the human was way more difficult. You know, and so, but I realized if I didn't get to help the human, you know, the horse wasn't going to make it at home. And then you start seeing how little it takes to get this big change. But you don't learn that overnight. You know, a few weeks ago I was in Austin, Texas, and I with my buddy Chad, and he said, you know, Jimmy Vaughn's playing up the road, you know. And he's playing at this club. We probably can't get him. Well, it was a weird night in Austin. No one was out. So we went up there, and there's nobody playing. We opened up this door of this club, and I said, there's some hippie there, dude, taking money. And I said, the band wasn't playing. I said, are they done? He said, they're going to play one more set. You know, the sign said 15, and there was hardly anybody in there. It was like only 60 people. Jimmy Vaughn, this guy, and another guy playing B3, a little band, a drummer, and I had never seen Jimmy Vaughn, but I saw him on PBS before, and I was blown away about how deep he was, about old school blues, you know. And there was this guy, and I went to the bathroom, I came out, and Chad lives in Austin. I said, is that Jimmy Vaughn sitting right there? And he says, yeah. And he was just sitting on the stool, and I watched the way he played. And it was just like, you know, that when someone's a master, they don't have to do shit. They don't have to do nothing to make it right, where it's all coming together. So he'd just be playing so simple, you know, like other guys would be, you know, he was a... That's all he's doing, man. No reverb. He wasn't even using his little finger like that. And it was just like, yeah, that's like when somebody's really talented with a horse. You don't see hardly much going on, but it's the perfect thing to do. And, you know, so I A-B everything in my life with horses, everything. Music, everything. It gets A-B'd with horses, people, everything. Because the approach those guys are trying to share, you know, and everything's getting all touchy-feely about those guys, you know, and fuzzy and warm, you know, and I knew that would happen. They were just guys, you know, they weren't gods or anything, you know, they were brilliant, excellent guys, thinkers and everything, you know. But they were human, and they gave things a lot of thought, and they were always thinking about it. This stuff with the horse, but he would say, this is just L-I-F-E, Mike, it's just life. And shit, he was right. You know, really, those guys were cool.
You feel like playing a song?
Sure. Yeah. Can I play that new one I wrote about Merle Haggard? Have you heard that?
I don't think I've heard that.
Yeah, let me sing this one.
I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, I was like Merle. I was pretty affected when Merle passed. You know, it was like a symbolic to me. It was like the end of a culture. So it was like the end of something. It was like when Jerry Garcia died. To me, it was like this culture, or this symbolic. It was like the end of a cultural phenomenon was over. And Merle, you know, was just, I got to spend a little time with him, and I just was in awe of him. You know, he was like so. You know, just like, I think one of my most very favorite songwriters of all time. Wrote in a very cool way. He was a band leader. He was a great band leader. He was this great singer and guitar player, and he was the real deal. And I thought when he passed, it affected me, like, you know, the end of something. It was symbolic to me, but. And where I grew up, when I started to play the guitar, play electric, I'd end up at the VFW and the Moose Lodge, with all these guys way older than me. And it was my country boot camp, it was like learning songs like Statue of a Fool and There Stands a Glass, and They Call Me a Playboy, and it was with California Okies. Big time. Salinas, every valley town had these honky-tonks. Tons of them. Fresno, Madera, Salinas. Those little guys said, yeah, I used to play at the Five High, and then you go across the street, and there was that, played 7 nights a week here. And I got in at the tail end of that. I played one of those places at the very end of '87, and I cowboyed during the day in Carmel Valley. I played 5 sets a night, 5 nights a week, and went to work at 7 a.m. And I had to play in there in this. It was a rough joint, a real dumpy place. But everybody played there through the years, But that was in the house band there. And Merle played there, and Ernest Tubb played there. But anyway, so I wrote this song. I'll play this. It's called The Son of the San Joaquin. You ever heard this? And someday, when things are good, I'm gonna leave you. That's just exactly what he did. He kicked out the footlights one more time, sat down, wrote his last song. Now the son of the San Joaquin is done moved on. When the worst hard times drove the Okies west and the dust began to blow, and the lonesome sound of the Santa Fe whistle got down in a young man's soul. Yeah, them valley towns, they were pretty rough. And they really got that good man down. Till 2 hard years in Quentin turned his life around. And someday, when things are good, I'm gonna leave you. That's just exactly what he did. He kicked out the footlights one more time, sat down, wrote his last song. Now the son of the San Joaquin has done moved on. Stealing cars in roughneck bars, forever the running kind. Memories of a daddy who left too soon were never far behind. Well, he showed weakness and he showed strength in the plight of the working man, and disappear in America in hard times across this land. And someday, when things are good, I'm gonna leave you. And that's just exactly what he did. He he kicked out the footlights one more time, sat down, wrote his last song. Now the son of the San Joaquin has done moved on. And I dreamed the fish were biting, and there was a smile on his face, and the fiddles and guitars picking round the shores of Shasta Lake, and the lonesome sound of the boxcars rumbling down the track. Rainbow stew and free bubble up a pretty lady to rub his back. And someday, when things are good, I'm gonna leave you. And that's just exactly what he did. He kicked out the footlights one more time, sat down, wrote his last song. Now the son of the San Joaquin has done moved on. Yeah, the Okie from Muskogee, he's done moved on. Son of the San Joaquin. From Merle.
All right, folks, that's it for this episode. I'll pick up where I left off with Mike on the next episode. I'd like to thank Mike Beck for taking the time to visit with me. You can find out more about Mike at mikebeck.com. You can find out more about me and this show at andyhedges.com. If you're enjoying this show and would like to help me keep it going, you can make a donation on the website. Or you could go to the iTunes store and leave me a 5-star rating and write a review. That helps more people find the show. Be sure and subscribe while you're there, and you'll never miss an episode. If you'd like to contact me with a question or a comment or tell me a story, I'd love to hear from you. Send an email to Andy at andyhedges.com. Thank you for listening to Cowboy Crossroads.